am so glad you're here. Today's episode is a really special one. We're talking about the feeling of safety, not as a buzzword, not as a policy, but as something that lives underneath everything, all the time. Safety is something we don't often discuss openly or consciously, even though it shapes so much. How we move, how we rest, how we imagine, how we survive. So instead of approaching it with urgency or explanation, we are going to enter this conversation gently. Or should I say, safely. Hey everyone, I'm Ama Robin, Aquaba. Welcome to You Ain't Imagining This. Right now, I'm in the Umoja Café here in YAIT. I've got an espresso. Some days it's hibiscus tea, but not today. And I'm letting myself be fully here for just a moment. I'm not rushing. I'm not scanning. I'm just noticing how my body feels. And the truth is, I'm talking about safety today because I'm feeling it right now. Besides my espresso, I'm also here for an Espresso Talk. What's that? I'm so glad you asked. An Espresso Talk is not a lecture or a debate. It's more of a reflection that begins from a real moment, something felt in the body or the mind or the spirit. Espresso Talks are where we pause long enough to name what's happening underneath our lives, especially the things we rarely say out loud. Today, as I said, for me, that's a feeling of safety. We'll begin with a short folk tale set near YAIT, and that is intentional. Stories help us approach ideas like safety without bracing. They create a little distance and a little room to breathe. I think we can all use some of that. I also want you to know what kind of space you're in here. In this episode, you may notice something. There will be no drama, no conflict, no need to brace yourself, no escalation, and nothing is demanded from you. That's not an accident. I created You Ain't Imagining This and YAIT itself so that we could have spaces like this, spaces where we can exhale, spaces where we can just be. Okay, I have only 2 requests from you. Please, number 1, come as you are. And number 2, take what you need. And I'll ask one tiny favor. If this conversation resonates with you, if it helps you name something or feel a little more grounded, then please like it, share it, and subscribe. If it helped you, it may help someone else too. We're here to help each other. And as I said, I am so glad that you're here today. Let's begin with our folk tale. And You Ain't Imagining This. The place where people sat. There is a story told in many places with small differences each time. It's about a neighborhood where people knew how to move carefully. Not because they were afraid of anything, but because they understood that the world asked a lot from them. In that neighborhood, there was a small place people returned to again and again. Sometimes it was a front stoop. Sometimes a courtyard. Sometimes just a stretch of sidewalk near a tree or a park bench. No one owned it. No one named it. It wasn't hidden or protected by lots of rules. People sat there when they needed to catch their breath. No one asked why they were there. No one asked how long they planned to stay. They didn't have to explain their face, their mood, or their silence. Some people came with groceries and rested for a minute before going on their way. Some people stopped after work and let the day fall off their shoulders. Teenagers laughed there, loud and unguarded, without being corrected. Elders sat there and watched the light change, saying very little. People didn't come there to solve problems. They came to steady themselves, to be themselves. And when they left, they went back into the world as it was, but their bodies were a little less tense. Their steps were a little slower. Their breath a little easier. No one claimed that place could protect them forever, but everyone understood this. You might not feel safe everywhere, but you need to feel safe somewhere. And that was enough to begin, and for the people to keep coming back. End of story. Now, before we go any further, I want us to slow down for just a moment. Let's take a deep breath together. In through the nose, and let's sigh it out the mouth. Great. I hope that you enjoyed the folktale. You might have noticed that nothing dramatic actually happened. No danger appeared. No one needed to be rescued. Nothing needed to be fixed. Yes, that's right. You listened to the right story. People just stopped. They sat. They laughed. They caught their breath. That was intentional. That was safety. Let me ask, how did that feel to you? Okay, you can be honest with me. Were you bored? Were you anticipating something, or that something was just about to happen? Then did you feel a little let down when nothing actually did happen? I promise you didn't miss anything in this story. Life was simply happening, and people were feeling safe. We live in a world where we can often feel that something is just around the corner. I remember someone once described it as a feeling of impending doom. It could feel like danger was coming, or that disappointment was nearby, or simply an undefined or an unspecified event that could be distressing. And yes, that feeling can keep us on edge, hypervigilant, distressed, tense, always anticipating. That is not a feeling of safety. Now that the story is over, let's take a moment to think about how it felt to be in these various spaces of safety. I like to call them pockets of safety. How did it feel to hear young people laughing with joy? How did it feel to imagine elders relaxing on a bench? Or how did it feel to think of gathering with friends on the front porch? Or to have no one question your presence? Or even just to be able to exist and let your body settle. Here's the final question. Do you have a space where you feel safe, or people with whom you know safety? I know it's a lot to think about. Take your time. When I talk about places or people of safety, I'm not talking about perfection or a permanent refuge. I'm not talking about escaping life. I'm talking about moments and spaces where your body can stop bracing, sometimes just for a few minutes. And for many of us, especially Black people, that matters more than we'd like to admit. For those of us living in predominantly white spaces, we often need our minds and bodies to stay alert. We need that hypervigilance, to scan, to prepare, to manage how we move, how we sound, how we take up space. So, when our mind and body encounter safety, even briefly, it's often not recognized. It can feel like boredom. It might even feel a little scary or threatening at first. It can feel so foreign. But safe spaces don't announce themselves loudly. Not all the time. They can show up quietly, and if we're not being mindful, we won't recognize the feeling of safety or recognize and enjoy how it feels. The feeling can show up in lots of different ways, as softer shoulders, as slower and deeper breathing, as laughter that doesn't need to be checked, as the absence of that constant low-level tension humming underneath everything. And when safety is experienced consistently, not just in moments, but across daily life, it shows up in the body over time. People sleep better. Blood pressure stabilizes. Chronic tension eases. Anxiety and depression soften. Insomnia becomes less constant. This isn't because life suddenly becomes perfect, but because the nervous system isn't living in a state of continuous alert. On a larger scale, safety supports mental health, makes self-care feel possible rather than indulgent, and it strengthens families and communities. When people don't have to brace all the time, they have more capacity to care for themselves, to care for one another, and to imagine futures that include rest, connection, and longevity. That's a feeling of safety I'm talking about here. Not safety as a promise, not safety as an ideal, but safety as a felt experience, a real experience. And it can be both individual and collective. We're going to get into that in a minute. When we talk about safety, we often talk about it in terms of external things, places or policies or protections, or even people. And those things definitely matter. But before safety becomes political or philosophical, it is actually physical. That's right, it's physical. The feeling of safety lives in the nervous system. And the feeling of lacking safety or danger also lives in the nervous system. One of the most surprising moments or pockets of safety I've experienced, yes, I'm going to get personal here, this came from the sound of a basketball bouncing. Actually, it was a group of young people playing basketball at a nearby court. And the ball was bouncing, and they were talking and laughing and trash talking, and you heard the breathing and the ball hitting the rim, and even the ball swooshing through the net. I heard it unexpectedly. All of these sounds, and they stopped me in my tracks. Something in my body recognized this as the sound of safety, that these sounds felt safe to me. I actually felt it, not intellectually, physically. I suddenly felt my body relax. My breathing became steady, and even a smile formed on my lips. But that moment also woke me up to something else too. I really had to think about this one. How often I don't feel safe. Not like I'm in danger, but just not safe. And how feeling unsafe or lacking that feeling of safety had quietly become my default feeling without my ever naming it or knowing it. And I noticed this again later when I had a cold and my husband read a story to me. And now I notice it in smaller, quieter ways. Yeah, storytelling can be a sound of safety. I didn't realize that. And it's a connection. And also for me, sitting by the open fireplace in my kitchen, sound of safety, hearing the crackle of the fire, and listening to people talking in the next room. These moments, they didn't announce themselves as safety. They didn't say, hey, this is safety. They simply arrived. And when they did, my body knew it. It was the difference between my body being on guard and my body being able to relax, even for a few minutes. It was the moment when my breath slowed and deepened without my trying to. When my jaw actually relaxed, I didn't realize how much my jaw was clenched. When my mind stopped racing ahead to what might happen next. For me, as a Black woman in particular, this kind of safety isn't something that I'm encouraged to expect. And as Black people, this feeling of safety is also not encouraged. Many of us are taught, explicitly or implicitly, that vigilance is just how life works, that vigilance keeps us safe, that being on edge is normal and even required. And I do understand that it comes from, as Black people, having to watch ourselves. That parents aren't telling their children this to destroy their happiness or so they don't feel safe. This is to keep them safe. And they tell them, I know I was, that calm is suspicious, it's temporary, and it's undeserved. So when we don't feel that tension, we often don't interpret it as a feeling of safety. We just know something feels different. And that's why pockets of safety matter. They matter a lot. And this makes me think of course, I'm thinking about him anyway because the King holiday just happened. It makes me think of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s reminder that peace is not the absence of tension, but it's the presence of justice. And I think safety works in a similar way. I'm always seeing connections everywhere. You guys probably recognize that. Safety isn't just the absence of a threat or conflict or harm. It's the presence of something felt and sustaining. Safety is the presence of ease in the body, of being able to exhale without watching yourself. Safety is the presence of dignity, where you don't have to earn your right to be at rest. It's the presence of care and familiarity and belonging, knowing that you won't be corrected or questioned or managed for simply existing. Safety is active. It is a feeling, and when it's present, it creates the conditions where all of us, can heal, where we can imagine and where we can live more fully. Oh, let's take a moment and let that sink in. Imagine where we can live under conditions where we can heal and imagine and live more fully. We also learn through the experience of feeling safe that another life experience is possible. In the folk tale, no one explains why that place near the porch or the park bench feels different. No one announces it. People just know that they can exist there without being questioned, without being rushed, and without being watched too closely. That's how safety often works in real life. It's not grand, it ain't declared, but it is felt, deeply felt. And once the body experiences that feeling of safety, once it remembers what it feels like not to brace, but to feel embraced, that knowledge doesn't disappear. And the need for that feeling does not disappear. It becomes a reference point. I know I started to notice where my body would soften, where I would relax, where the tension I held in my shoulders, that's where I tend to hold my attention, would melt away. You started to notice where the tension was. And slowly, without forcing anything, my sense of what was livable and acceptable began to shift. And this was a major shift. That wasn't escapism. That was information, and it was evidence. And from that information, from that evidence, from those small, ordinary pockets of safety, that everything else I could imagine, build, or refuse began to take shape. Yes, this was big. I think you can all hear that this was a life-changing moment for me, a real revelation. Perhaps I would even go so far as to call it an epiphany. So when I talk about pockets of safety, I'm talking about moments that are so ordinary, they are easy to overlook, and I think we often do, because nothing about them is so dramatic, and perhaps that is the point. Then I began remembering other times that I felt this kind of ease or safety. I'm going to share this with you quickly. One time I was walking through the campus at Morehouse, and I saw a group of young men where it was gathered by the student union. They weren't doing anything dramatic by any objective standard. They were just talking and laughing and whooping it up, the way we used to say back home. No one was performing, no one was shrinking, and no one was watching them too closely. In fact, there was a security guard working close by at his stand and his post, and he wasn't paying the least bit of attention to these men. They were just young black men being loud, relaxed, and unbothered. That wasn't a spectacle. It was a pocket of safety. And I know that now because I remember feeling my body relax. And I've shared this before, but again, I have felt it sitting in black-owned stores, particularly bookstores, settling into a chair with the book and realizing that no one is timing me, no one's waiting for me to prove I belong, no one is watching me to see if I'm about to be a problem. There's no pressure to buy something that I don't want, no need to keep a receipt like evidence. Just time, there was just presence and just safety. And I felt it at black marketplaces, places that are often described by mainstream narratives as chaotic or they're unsafe. And yet, when I'm there, my body tells a different story. I feel welcomed. I feel held by the community, embraced even. I feel seen, but not surveilled. Yeah, the music is loud and the people are talking over each other and someone is smiling at nothing in particular, and I feel my body relax. That matters. Because so much and so often the places where Black people feel safest are mislabeled by people who just don't understand, because they're not part of the community, and because sometimes they fear us. What looks like danger to some can feel like belonging to others. I know an opposite kind of experience I had when I was in Germany with a friend of mine who was white. And I know when I was there, I was feeling pretty tense and vigilant and stressed and really watching people and their reactions to me closely, particularly as they were watching me. Now, my friend, my white friend, she was saying, wow, people are so friendly. This is so nice. I'm so relaxed. I feel so welcomed here. And honestly, I didn't share what I was going through with her. She wasn't experiencing that. But I know that I wasn't experiencing what she was. I didn't feel the safety. And she did. Very interesting. I should go into this a little bit more. Perhaps even share this with her one day. And then there are actually the quieter pockets, getting back to the story. The ones that exist just for me. I like that feeling. Like I said before, sitting in front of the fireplace at home, wrapped in a blanket. Walking in the forest, letting my thoughts settle into the rhythm of my steps. Hearing the birds chirping, sometimes even the owls, because I will go at night. And hearing the wind rustling through the trees. Or sitting with friends in a cafe, talking and not rushing to get anywhere else. None of these moments will fix the world or fix everything in my life. None of them will erase the realities that I live with, that we all live with. But they do something important. They give the body that reference point. They show us what it feels like not to be braced, but to feel embraced. They remind us that safety doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives as familiarity, community, or peace, as feeling welcomed, belonging. These are pockets of safety, and they're real. They are so real. And when we recognize them, when we honor and protect them, the feeling they create can grow. Not all at once, not everywhere, but enough to matter. And then anything less becomes unacceptable. What's been really striking to me as I've reflected on these pockets of safety and that feeling of safety is how invisible the difference can feel until you feel it. I didn't always have language for it. I just knew that when I, for example, went into a Black-owned bookstore or any Black-owned store and that no one bothered me, something in my body softened. I exhaled. No one watched to see how long I stayed. No one tracked whether I was buying something, and no one seemed concerned about my presence. It felt safe. And yet it wasn't just what wasn't happening. It was the feeling that I had there, that I was welcome, that I belonged, that I was a part of that community. That is where I felt safe. And then I realized that in many predominantly white spaces, spaces that aren't hostile, spaces where I'm not in danger, I still do arrive differently. I put on that mask that we often wear. I become more careful. I monitor myself just enough to stay comfortable for me and for everyone else. Yep, I'm just going to say it, and for everyone else. But I didn't feel necessarily unsafe. But the thing is, though, I didn't feel free or relaxed or safe. And that difference does matter, because safety isn't only about the absence of threat, as we said before. It's also about the absence of performance, about whether your body gets to exhale or whether it stays just slightly alert, just in case. And for me as a Black woman, and perhaps for many other Black people, that low-level vigilance has been normalized for so long that we actually stop noticing it. We assume it's just the cost of moving through the world. But when you step into a space where you don't have to manage yourself in that way, the contrast becomes clear. When you step into a space where somebody smiles at you when you walk in, or you just feel that sense of belonging, the contrast becomes even clearer. Sometimes uncomfortably clearer. I've noticed this when I've been traveling. And I've had Black friends tell me that when they moved to predominantly Black countries, in Africa or in the Caribbean, they actually had a reduction in any health problems they had. Chronic health issues that they had managed for years began to ease or disappear. Their blood pressure lowered. Long-held tension softened. Their bodies that had been on constant alert finally had room to rest. And I do recognize that feeling because I noticed it when I went to Ghana and Senegal and Jamaica, majority Black countries. In those spaces, the feeling of safety was so complete that I didn't even think about it anymore. And my body didn't register it as a special condition. It felt normal. And that does say something. And what says something more too is I thought about when I was returning back to Europe, I almost felt some tension with that and anticipating something that was I guess it was still in my bones because I've been here for so long. Kind of a fear almost that, or a grief, let's say, because I knew that feeling of safety everywhere I went was about to come to an end, that feeling. And other times I recognized that feeling, like when I was in predominantly Black countries, immediately feeling at home and not having to wear a mask or to tone police myself or to think carefully about how I was being read. That means so much. I wasn't scanning for attention or managing my presence. My body understood that it was safe. That kind of safety doesn't just feel good. It changes how you inhabit yourself. It reminds you what living without constant vigilance can feel like and how much the body has been carrying without being asked, and sometimes without it even being noticed, because it's been normalized. And honestly, that is not a coincidence. That's the body responding to an environment where it doesn't have to brace. When all of these health issues began to clear up, and I'm not saying that's going to happen all the time or for everybody and in every way, but we do know that chronic stress does put a lot of pressure on the body, and it can cause health, mental health, and physical health problems. That's, as I said, that is the body responding to an environment where it doesn't have to brace, and it can start to heal. And that tells us something important. These pockets of safety are not indulgences. They're not luxuries we should just dismiss or put off or say, well, it's not that important. They're not nice if you can get them. They are health, they're joy, they're life, and they are survival. And again, this is information. It shows us what our bodies are capable of when they're not constantly adapting to harm or anticipated harm. They give us a felt sense, not just an idea, but a real experience of the life we deserve to live and the kind of world in which we deserve to live. Yeah, that's true. That realization does come with grief or with jealousy or a quiet anger at how easily others can move through certain spaces without thinking about safety at all. And worse, actually denying it to others. And we've definitely seen that happen. But this experience of safety does come with a vision. Because once you've experienced it, I'm telling you, that kind of ease, even briefly, then you know it's possible. Not abstractly, not someday, not for someone else, but in real places with real people under real conditions and for you. And that knowledge changes what we're willing to accept. It shifts the question from, why am I so tired? Why am I so exhausted? Why am I so tense? To, why am I required to live like this at all? And others aren't. But if we just focus on us, why am I required to live like this at all? My answer is, we're not. And that's why these spaces matter. They don't just help us rest, they help us remember. And they help us imagine clearly, concretely, what kind of world we can start practicing right now in those pockets of safety and from those pockets of safety. I think you know what's coming next. No? I think you know, because usually this is the moment when people expect instructions, the call to action, here's what you do, and steps on how to recognize and experience those feelings of safety. Perhaps you are expecting a list, a framework, yes, that call to action, the CTA, but that's not where counter or new world building actually begins. New world building, and that's what we're doing, doesn't start with construction. Don't start with immediately building the world. It starts with recognition. And this is all tied into imagination and vision. Before we can build another way of living, we have to know in our bodies, minds, hearts, spirits, souls, what supports us and what drains us. We have to recognize the difference between spaces that require constant adaptation and spaces that allow us to arrive exactly as we are. That's why pockets of safety matter so much. They're not the world we want yet, but they're evidence. They show us in real time that another way of being already exists in micro dosages, that dignity does not need to be invented. It needs to be protected and expanded. It's time that we start practicing the world that we want. And practice doesn't mean pretending everything is fine and that every place is safe. It means learning through lived experience what feels like safety and dignity and what doesn't feel like safety or dignity. It can look like, noticing when your shoulders drop, noticing your body, recognizing when your breath deepens, paying attention to where you don't have to explain yourself, remembering what those micro dosages of ease felt like, and feeling embraced. Okay, you got your list. That was just a short one though, but I think they do give an image. We've been talking about them throughout this episode. And this isn't passive to focus on recognition. That is preparation. Because once your body knows what safety feels like, you might begin to move differently. You might make different choices about where you linger, where you return, and what you stop tolerating. And that's where counter world building can actually begin, not with blueprints, but with discernment. We don't build new worlds by forcing ourselves to endure or accept less. We build them by learning what allows us to move and to live more fully, and refusing to let that knowledge go. In the next conversations, we'll talk more directly about what it means to practice new world building. In the next episodes, really, because this one's getting longer than I expected. But in a way, we'll look at world building in a way that's radical and responsible. But for now, I think this is enough. This Espresso Talk has really become more of a double or a triple espresso. But remember, noticing is enough. Remembering is enough. Beginning here is enough. But it definitely is not the end. Well, I think it is time to wind down this Espresso Talk episode. I have long since finished more than one espresso, but it's really given me time to reflect, and I'm really honored that I could reflect with you. And as we come to a close, I want to briefly return to the folktale that we began with, the pockets of safety that people return to again and again. Nothing dramatic happened there. There were no great transformations. There were just spaces where people could pause and sit and laugh and let their bodies settle before moving on. Those small, ordinary places illustrated what we've been talking about today. Pockets of safety, moments of safety. Some were alone, some were with others. The individual and the collective, we need both. And this was not an imaginary utopia, but it was real enough to change how we move through the world. Those pockets are where new world building or counter world building actually begins. Not in theory, not in slogans, but in lived moments where dignity is assumed and where the body doesn't have to brace. The body and mind can feel free. If this conversation stirred something in you, if it reminded you of how your own pockets of safety helped you to name something that you've been feeling, then you're welcome to join the conversation and continue this in the YAIT Town community on the School app. That's SKOOL. And that is a space where we share experiences, we reflect together, and we really hold one another with care. And this is definitely a safe space. As I said earlier, this conversation took the form of an espresso talk because some topics do need the space to breathe. And espresso talks are where we slow down just enough to think together, reflectively, honestly, without urgency or performance. And we're going to keep using this format sometimes to explore ideas like safety, imagination, world building, and what it means to live Black in a world that often demands us to let go of any desire or need for safety. So as you move back in your day, especially if you're living or working in predominantly white spaces, I hope that you find small moments of safety and pockets of safety that let your body stand down for a while. Moments where your shoulders soften, where your breath deepens, and you don't have to manage how you're being read. I hope you find places, alone or with others, where laughter doesn't need to be edited, where silence doesn't feel suspicious, where you feel quietly embraced without explanation. May those moments meet you in ordinary ways, and may they remind you that ease is not a luxury. It's something you deserve. You deserve to feel safe, whoever you are and wherever you are. And YAIT Town is here for you. And so remember, come as you are. Take what you need. I'm Amma Robin, for you ain't imagining this. One love, fam.